If you are thinking about embarking on the expat life and moving here to Singapore, then watch this video because I'll be sharing a few tips that I wish I knew before I moved here. For context, I've been living in Singapore for the past 2 years. I am an American expat, originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I came here in 2024 without knowing a soul. And in hindsight, honestly, there are a couple things that I wish I did a bit differently when I was first setting up my life here. So I want to share some of those lessons with you guys today because I think it will save you guys a lot of pain and maybe some money. First off, let me just give a bit of context as to how I ended up in Singapore in the first place. So I came to Singapore with a job lined up. I'd been working for my company for about 3 years before I moved to Singapore. I work for an American company. It's also a multinational company. So they were able to sponsor my employment pass, which is my visa that essentially allows me to work and live in Singapore. This country offers a couple different types of visas for expats. EP, which is what I have, is one of them. There's also the S pass and the dependence pass and a couple other passes. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of like the visa situation in this video, but if you guys want a whole separate video on how to set up your life in Singapore and the visa situation, let me know in the comments and I'll make it for you guys. But yes, I was able to move to Singapore on an employment pass with my company, but once I arrived, I still had to figure out a lot of the moving situation and the housing situation by myself. And there are a couple lessons that I've gained from this whole process that I'd like to share with you guys. So let's get into it. So one of the first things I had to figure out when I decided to move to Singapore was housing. And because I already had a job lined up, I was in a bit of a rush to find housing. So I essentially signed a 1-year lease before I even landed in the country, which I do not recommend. Okay, I think I got lucky because this place is great, to be honest, but I think I could have saved a lot more money if I just gave myself some time to settle into the country. So while I was still in the Bay Area, I did a lot of like virtual tours. I looked on Property Guru, which is the website that a lot of Singaporeans use to find their housing. It's very similar to like Zillow or Redfin if you live in the States, but I did a lot of online shopping basically. And through that, I made my decision on the condo that you currently see I am in. And that came with a couple of implications. I think for one, if you're just doing a virtual tour, the agent could very easily omit information and then it would be very hard for you to know that until you arrived. So that's one thing. Like for example, right now I live in a condo that's connected to a hotel and it's quite expensive. I pay 3,900 Sing, which is about $3,000 USD for like a small studio / 1-bed apartment. I got pretty lucky because nothing's like wrong with my apartment. It's just I did not know that our amenities here in my condo are shared with hotel guests, which would have been great to know, right? So I think that's one thing, is just like it's always best to just be able to go and tour the place in person. And another thing is, I think if I gave myself a bit more time to actually come to Singapore, settle in, understand the MRT system, understand the different neighborhoods, then I would have realized just how easy it was to get around Singapore, and that I probably would have picked something that's like less central. Because currently I live in the central business district. I live in a very convenient area that's super central, but because of that, it's very expensive. So I think I could have saved probably a couple $1,000s if I had just lived maybe 15 minutes out from where I currently am. So just know if you're moving here, it's okay to actually not live in the most central area, but it is important to live near an MRT station. So one thing I wish I knew is that Singapore has a lot of really great options when it comes to short-term rentals. There are different companies including Figment, Cove, Habit that provide these move-in ready situations. It's kind of like a hotel, but it's cheaper usually. But the trade-off is that you typically have to live with strangers, but they're furnished, they have Wi-Fi, utilities, you don't have to set anything up, and you can just stay there short term while you familiarize yourself with the country, the different neighborhoods, the transit system. And this is something I wish I did, is just given myself the time to really explore before I committed to a lease. Something else I wish I knew is that Singapore condos usually run based on 2-year leases, or that's usually what landlords are looking for. I personally asked for a 1-year lease because I wasn't sure how long I would be here. But because of that, they bumped my price quite a bit. So if I were you, I would ask for a 2-year lease to just keep the lower price, but there's something you could ask for. This is a bit of an insider tip. It's called the diplomatic clause, and sometimes it's already included in your lease agreement. Sometimes you have to negotiate for it with your landlord, but definitely ask for that because that will allow you to leave your lease after, I believe, 1 year. I think it depends on what you're able to negotiate with your landlord, but essentially the diplomatic clause allows you to leave your lease early if you are leaving the country. So keep that in mind and ask your landlord about it. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to housing is the electricity bill, okay? Your girl usually ends up spending between $140 to $170 Singaporean dollars a month on utilities and electricity. That's because I keep the aircon on basically every day. It's very hot here. So if you're not used to the hot and humid weather, just know you might be using the air conditioning and that could really like bump up your bill every month. So just keep that in mind when you're budgeting for housing. Last thing to note when it comes to housing is make sure you read through your lease agreement or your contract very, very closely because there are a couple of rules here in Singapore that are very common when it comes to housing that you might not be used to if you are coming from like a different housing market or a different country. One common one is usually there's some sort of minimum or deductible that you have to pay for anything that breaks in your condo. So for example, in my lease agreement, it says that if anything breaks, such as like the aircon or maybe the fridge, I have to pay up to $300 to repair whatever it is. And then anything over that, my landlord will pay for. So that $300 I think can be negotiable depending on your landlord. And along with that, at the end of your lease, there are usually quite a few things that the tenant has to take care of before doing the handover. For example, we have to get the whole apartment deep cleaned, and this requires me to hire someone who's actually like specializes in end of tenancy deep cleaning. This can be quite expensive actually, like a few $100s. And then also the curtains that you see behind me need to be dry cleaned, which is something I never knew about, but it's very, very common in Singapore. So just read through your lease agreement and your contract very carefully before you sign and make sure you discuss any particulars with your landlord. Okay, let's talk about the work culture. So a couple things I've noticed about Singapore's work culture is that for one, Singaporeans make really great employees. I think a lot of different people will tell you this, like locals and expats included, that Singapore is honestly a great place to hire from because the whole society and the way you grow up here, the education, everything shapes you to be a very good employee. And as part of that, I think that people tend to work very hard here in their careers. People really care about like titles, where you went to school is very important when it comes to like a white collar job. Along with that, I think overseas experience is really sought after, to be honest. Hierarchy still is very, very important here and respected. And that's another thing I would take note of. So overall, the work culture, like I'd say it really depends on the industry or the company, or whether you work at a local company or a multinational corporation, but people tend to work very hard. Overtime is very common, if not expected. And so yeah, just keep that in mind if you are moving here. Now, adding on to this, culture-wise, Singapore is a very rules-based society. Now, I kind of knew this coming into Singapore, but I did not know the full extent of it, right? Because you hear things like, oh, gum is contraband, you can't eat or drink on the subway, you can't play loud music, you can't talk loud on public transit. Like all these things are true, but at the same time, this is why Singapore is so safe, right? Like it's because there's so many rules and because the government is so good at enforcing the rules, and also because the people in Singapore are happy with the rules and okay to follow them, that it's so safe. I've walked home by myself very late at night many times and I've never felt endangered. And I could not say the same if I were in San Francisco walking home by myself late at night. But there is a flip side, because if everyone's growing up in this very rules-based society, everyone's taught to follow the rules, it kind of creates a society that's like okay with a very linear path and fitting into like a mold or box. And if you're not within that mold or box, it's almost looked down upon. I would say that, I mean, this is not true of everybody and it's changing. And I think that like people are becoming more open-minded, but I would just also keep that in mind if you're moving to this country. So let's talk about taxes. One thing that I wish I knew about taxes before I moved to Singapore, specifically from the perspective of an American, is that I am taxed in Singapore and I'm taxed in the US. I will say that there are some exemptions that you get granted as an American expat. Like your American taxes won't be as high as they usually are if you're just like working and living in the States. And also in Singapore, the tax rates are very low compared to the US. But still, just read up on the taxes and your tax situation before you move here. So another thing that people usually ask me about Singapore is like, what is the tipping culture like? I think if you come from the US, then you know that tips are usually expected. And it's like a whole contentious debate that's happening in the US about the tipping culture, which we will not get into. But overall, tips in Singapore are not expected the same way that they are in the US. Usually you don't tip for things. It's not as common. It's kind of like other Asian countries where tips are usually not expected. I mean, people will receive it and they will not take offense to you tipping them, but at the same time, it's not expected. And what you see on your final bill is what you're expected to pay. Next thing I want to talk about is making friends. So when it comes to making friends in Singapore, I wish I knew that it's actually very easy. The locals are super friendly and welcoming, and everyone speaks English, and everyone's kind of used to the global nature of this country. So I really enjoy that. There are a few resources that I wish I knew were at my disposal when I first moved here that would have made it like a lot easier and faster for me to make friends. For example, Bumble BFF is super common here. Like I've met a lot of my friends through Bumble BFF. It's not looked down upon, it's not weird. Like a lot of expats meet their friends on Bumble BFF, and a lot of my friends have met each other on the app as well. So definitely download that if you're moving here. Additionally, there are a lot of different expat groups here that you could join. For example, one of the big ones is called Singapore Global Network. And they throw a lot of mixers, both professional and like just more fun social events for a lot of expats in the country. You'll meet people from all over the world, and their events are really fun. I've met quite a few friends through their events that I'm still friends with today. And their events are not just expats, but a lot of locals also go. So I've also made a lot of different local friends through their events. So I highly recommend checking them out. There are also a lot of different sports and fitness related social groups. For example, if you're a runner, then there are so many different run clubs in Singapore, especially if you're coming to this country single and you're looking to date. Like, I think these run clubs are basically dating clubs. So maybe think about joining one of those if you want to find a mate in Singapore, or if you just want to like get your fitness up. There are also like tennis clubs, there are golf clubs, a lot of just different sports clubs, and those are a great way to meet friends. And along with that, there are also like some more exclusive social clubs in Singapore that you can join if you have the budget. Think of them like as Soho House. So you have to pay a monthly fee usually and some sort of initiation fee, but it's kind of like a more curated way to make friends or to build a network in Singapore. I think one sad part about Singapore's social scene is that it's very transient. So a lot of times you'll meet friends here and then in 1 or 2 years time, like they'll leave. I think that's really like, that's like the terrible part about Singapore is that I think like any other big global city, it attracts people from all over the world, like super ambitious, fun, amazing people. And they might be from places that you've never even visited in your life, you know? So it's really cool. But at the same time, if you don't settle down here, they'll just end up leaving in 1 or 2 years. So it's really sad. Like you'll make friends and you'll lose them very quickly. So also keep that in mind. And while we are on this topic of friendship, let's talk about dating. So I personally am not dating in Singapore. I'm in a relationship, but I have observed a few things about the dating scene just through some of my single friends here. And one big thing to note is that if you're coming to this country single, you're looking to date, a lot of the locals stay at home until they're married. So it's not uncommon to see guys in their mid-30s who are unmarried and still living with their parents is actually very common here, and it's very well respected. It's just part of the Asian culture. Obviously, this is very different if you are dating expats, but for the locals, for the most part, they usually stay home until they're married. Another thing to know if you are moving to Singapore is that it is very, very easy to travel here. The Changi Airport is one of the most well-connected airports in the world. It has a direct flight to San Francisco, but also to a lot of places in Europe, and it's super, super, super connected in Asia. And also the flights tend to be really cheap if you want to travel around Southeast Asia. I think Singapore is the best base to do that because the flights can go as low as like $50 Singaporean, and it's like an hour or two to get to your destination. You could spend a few days there and make it back by Monday. Also, the airport is insanely efficient. I'm not even exaggerating when I say you can get to the airport and through security within 5 minutes. Like, everything's automated, everything's very, very fast, and everything's just done very efficiently. So it's a great place to travel. Another thing to know about Singapore is that there is a very big fitness scene here, which is great. A lot of really great gyms. ClassPass is a very big thing here. If you guys have used that, it's an app that allows you to try out different workout classes. There are a lot of different class options. And in fact, one thing I wish I did differently about living in Singapore the last 2 years is I wish I did not buy my expensive gym membership, and instead I used that money on just ClassPass credits to go to different studios, because the studios here are just really good. And also, going back to the run clubs, there are plenty of those here, and to be honest, it's a great way to improve your overall health, because running in this weather outside is painful. But if you can do that, you can do anything. And also, I think it's a great way for you to acclimate your body to the weather and the climate here. So also highly recommend that. Okay, let's talk about food and groceries. So another thing I did not know about Singapore is that a lot of locals and expats tend to not cook that much. It's actually because the groceries are relatively expensive here. For example, if you want to buy a box of strawberries, it can go for literally $15 or more. And that's because everything's imported. I will say also, like, a lot of the produce is not amazing, to be honest. Like, it's a little bit bland, except for the mangoes, okay? The mangoes from Thailand, amazing. Definitely get the honey Thai mangoes specifically. But other than that, the produce is kind of meh, and also it's very expensive. And also, on top of that, the food is very, very delicious, and it can be very cheap if you're eating from like local hawker centers. Your meal could be like $4 Singaporean, and it's like a very vibrant, delicious, amazing meal that's balanced and probably better than what you could cook. So I think that's why a lot of locals tend to just eat out. It's very common here. Okay, if you watched to the end of this video, I really, really appreciate it. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'm very close to 1,000 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate if you could contribute to that. And also comment down below any feedback you have or what you would like to see from me next.